Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.
Good evening, everyone. I think this is an important session. We're discussing the structure of African trade. I mean, Africa is renowned for its significant positioning in the world. All over the world, people are rooting for Africa, from Europe to America, from all over the world. But Africa is not rooting for itself because of the lack of policy intelligence in all her innovations. We've seen many innovations coming from Africa. I mean, up to the last one, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that was signed in 2018. That is a very powerful treaty that have a far-reaching solution on paper to the problems of Africa. But how well is it faring today? That is the question we need to answer. First, that treaty have a problem. It has a problem because after the treaty was signed, we lost 3 other African countries to military intervention. So what that means is that it strikes on the socio-political chord of Africa that it has not delivered solution to the real problem of Africa. Now, when you look at trade itself generally, before the 70s, we had considerable inter-trade activities within Africa. Then it was majorly agricultural produce and some other economic activities that revolves around just agrarian economy. And when oil was discovered in major countries in Africa, the focus of African trade changed and we had diversions. We also began to listen to the World Bank and IMF to help us with structural solution as to how Africa can come to health and growth. There we lost focus. Today, Africa is doing trade, between 10 to 13%. Globally, we are just at 3% the world over, if you look at the WTO record. So how do we solve the problem of Africa? I don't want to talk so much about the problems. We have been talking about the problems for a long time. What are the solutions to this problem? First, I think that Africa must decide a system of government that will guarantee growth. In most African countries, they call the systems of government democracy on paper. But you find that, whether you are democratic, a democratic nation in Africa, or a military regime, or whatsoever kind of government, it is the same stunted growth. Corruption is dealing with Africa in a way that it looks like there's no solution to the problem. From Nigeria to Cameroon to whichever side you look at Africa. Except for Botswana and few other countries like Tanzania, the other countries are doing very, very poorly in terms of political and economic development. Majorly because too many countries in Africa are now, suffering from military intervention, which is not a solution to the problem, even though in some countries, because citizens are tired of the kind of democracy they are fed with, they are calling for military intervention. But the major issue here is to see that we come to solution. First of all, the issue of the visa regime, which you have said it, all the while. We must take down that because there is no point trying to trade when you cannot move. Why can't Africa, for example, have railways across the countries to connect the countries? Why can't Africa host the World Cup, for example? And connect all the countries and deal with a major problem And that is to create a system that will not only uplift and take the citizens of this country out of poverty, but a new system that will create positive engagement where these leaders can come together and contribute immensely to the development of Africa. They said that the world over, Africa have the largest deposits of wealth. I mean, even when Africa trade, what they trade is natural resources. The capacity to process produce is lacking. And so we give out all we have in crude forms. And you know, whilst I was reading about the history of trade in Africa, I stumbled on the story of the former king of Mali, who usually will go to Hajj in 1325 with 100 camels of gold. And he will share this gold. When he gets there, he will share everything. And he will have to go and borrow money to return back to Mali. That kind of system is what we still practice today in Africa. There's so much waste. I mean, policies that we're talking about today, we cannot find direction if we don't have a proper formation and a proper commitment to grow Africa and make it formidable. The monies we lose every year to educational tourism and medical tourism is just enough to start up something formidable for Africa, to grow Africa. And the natural resources, that's a natural blessing to us. We should be able to come together and find solution around it. The problem of corruption at some point must be suppressed to give Africa some space to breathe so that we can develop a proper structure. Now, for the African Continental Free Trade Area, the treaty itself, the shortcomings are that it may not see the light of the day because as of today, I don't think it's doing up to 7%. Just like the SDG goals that are doing up to 18% as we speak, this particular program or this treaty is doing very poorly. Okay, it's doing very poorly because, I mean, it's a testament here. We all know how we got here. I mean, if we have this kind of treaty, why should we struggle to come here? Why should we have all the bottlenecks across the space? So it is important that we deal with that. And this won't also work until we have dealt with insecurity in, especially the West African sub-region, okay, where it's like a gateway into the African space. There's a need to deal with this insurgency that have, taking over the stratosphere in that axis, and that is creating so much havoc for us and giving us a bad name across the globe. Africa must do something different at some point to grow, its economy. And the biggest tragedy for this is, like my friend said earlier on, it's not even the lack of cohesion in trade movement or xenophobia or any kind of political instability and the rest of that, but that primarily the issue of lack of policy intelligence. We can come up with another treaty very soon and come up with others, as many as we can come up with. But most of the times we don't have the steps. There are no formidable steps, okay, to really make a difference in this space. And when we don't have these formidable steps, there is no way we can change the space of Africa. I mean, we have leaders in Africa that have been there for 30 years plus, some 20 years. Some, even after they lose election, they tell you they won't leave until there's an envoy somewhere or some kind of arrangement to take them out. So Africa cannot grow in that dimension. And to add to this, even when Africa trades across the world, it trades just, like I said before, raw materials. Why can't Africa trade proper human capital? That is, why can't Africa trade IT? Okay, we only import all this. If you check your phone, you download apps and you use apps, all these apps they are not made in Africa. They are not developed here. So let Africa grow itself through proper policy on education to empower human capital so that in return, we should be able to export proper human capital. What we export is just talents. From Nigeria, we export entertainment in a great deal. Music, creatives. We do all that in the African space. But when you talk about human capital proper, people who have been processed and trained to go export talents, we're not doing so very well there. I've been told that my time is up, so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.